Hello. I am not sure. Can people hear me now? Am I live?
Yes, Ruth, you are live.
All right. So welcome everyone to this session, and pardon me for fumbling around with the technology. I hope that I cannot fumble it up too much. So this is a panel on food insecurity in higher ed. I think that there are a lot of different ways that people think about food insecurity in higher ed. I thought I would start us off with just a little bit of data and then introduce some of the speakers and panelists that we have for today. So food insecurity in higher ed is different based on different types of institutions. So you can see the Urban Institute did a study on assessing food insecurity on campuses and found that it's most prevalent in two-year private colleges and two-year public colleges. That then four-year publics and four-year privates, it's less prevalent. But that certainly doesn't give a lot of detail in what it looks like. So, at the ground level, what does it mean to be food insecure on a college campus? So there have been a number of studies done out west, especially in California, and we have some data from the SUNY system here. So food insecurity often looks like people who have access to different food assistance programs and don't take advantage of them while they're on campus. So we can see that 50% of college students eligible for SNAP reported not receiving those benefits in 2016. So I think you get to a college campus and have a sense that rules kind of change and you don't get access to the resources you had before. 10% of UC students eligible for SNAP were enrolled. So it's pretty low. If we look at a study that was done recently by the SUNY system, we'll find that, mostly undergraduates answered the survey. The question is, were you ever hungry but didn't eat because you didn't have enough money for food? And 40% said yes, and 54% in college and community college campuses. Or have you ever been unable to study or focus because you were hungry and could not afford food? So almost 33% of people found that they were unable to concentrate, or 45% in community colleges because they did not have access to food. And so these numbers show that really, in our college campuses, the effects of food insecurity are more nuanced and have different types of effects on our college students. I think that we have are we ready to bring the panelists in? Are they all here? So we have a few panelists with us today. Less lonely now that I see you all here. And so to give a little sense, I think that one of the strengths of this panel is that we have some different ways of thinking about food security on our campuses, both on public and private campuses, as well as from student administrative kind of different points of view. I'll give it just a second to introduce very briefly who's on our panel. When I say your name, say hello. So we have Florian, say hi.
Hello.
And Florian and Robbie.
Hey, friends.
They are both at Geneseo College. They are two of our student activists, and they recently were accepted for the Bill Emerson National Hunger Fellowship through the Congressional Hunger Center. I'm embarrassed at how long it took them to get me to be able to say that. It's hard to say, but apparently it's even harder to get into. And so very proud of that work and excited to hear about the student point of view on not just hunger on college campuses, but what do students do to advocate and for different programs and policies. I'm Ruth Castle. I'm the Associate Director for Academic Community Engagement at Siena College, and I pretty much get involved with all different sorts of issues and research and teaching type programs. So one of those issues has been hunger in the past. Sally D'Alessandro, say hello. She is the Assistant Dean of Students for the Student Care Services, so running the Purple Pantry, which is a very well-known and well-run pantry, and she's well regarded for her work in supporting students on beyond, in hunger needs and beyond. So the idea of kind of thinking more holistically about student needs. We have Natalie Jacobson. Say hello.
Hello.
As our campus kitchen coordinator at Augsburg University. And she has a great focus on food pantries that both serve on campus and off campus. And then I don't know if John is with us yet, but hopefully he will be here. I think he's lost somewhere in cyberspace, but we will find him and he will come here. And which is good because he is the senior advisor to the chancellor in the SUNY system. And he's here. He's waiting to be admitted. There he is. Hi, John.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Say hello to everyone.
Okay. Hello, everyone.
Senior advisor to the chancellor and provides oversight for all system-wide educational opportunity programs, including the Educational Opportunity Centers for Academic and Workforce Development, coordination and sustainability of system-wide student mental health and wellness task force, the food insecurity task force. John, there are a lot of task forces on your bio, so I don't think I'm going to. But needless to say, he's had multiple leadership positions and is definitely a man of action. And so, without further ado, I thought I would kind of start us off with one question that we'll all respond to. Maybe I'll start off with the students, move to Natalie and Sally, and end with John. Why is college hunger an important topic for people to know about? And what does it look like from where you sit? So maybe Robbie, start us off.
Okay. Yeah, and thanks so much for having me, Ruth. I'm definitely appreciate the opportunity to be here and just talk about college food insecurity. I think Florian can definitely give maybe a different perspective on why it's so important to look at. But for me, why I think college food insecurity is so important is that I think it's a widely misunderstood issue, and I think it's not really given the prominence that it deserves. With college students, there's a common stereotype that, being food insecure is just a part of being a college student. There's so many jokes about like having ramen for every meal or, not being able to having to skip meals sometimes. And, there's a kind of a toxic culture around college students where it's just kind of the expectation when you're a college student that you have to suffer to get your degree. And no one in our country should be suffering for any reason, obviously. It just needs to be known that college students are a vulnerable group for food insecurity. College students a lot of times don't even know that they're food insecure because they do see it as just the expectation of being a college student. And so it's just so important to educate college students and the wider community so that people understand how important it is for people to get the food assistance that they need.
Thank you. Florian, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think it's important because it perpetuates societal inequities at an institution where many people are turning to for better opportunity. It impacts the quality of education as well as the opportunities of the next generation of degree-holding professionals. Of course, if a student is living hand to mouth, they aren't going to be able to retain as much of what they're learning. But beyond that, they're also not going to necessarily have the time or energy to engage in extracurriculars that provide the hands-on experience that grad schools and employers are frequently looking for. This also kind of limits the financial stability that those people could have in their future. Of course, we're taking on a lot of debt to obtain a degree, but not everybody is able to straight out of the gate start paying that off. So I would say that college hunger can perpetuate societal inequities that are already existing when students are going into the institution.
Wonderful. And I think people think, colleges have these dining services and they're just there. And so students have access to food all day, every day, the freshman 15, right? And so there's definitely assumption that everyone has access to the same resources when they get to a campus, that it doesn't always play out. And I've certainly seen, especially commuter students who are, who can see food in front of them and don't have access to it. And it's very hard to watch. How about Natalie? So from the perspective of the people who run pantries on campuses, why is college hunger an important topic? And what does it look like from where you sit?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Natalie. I'm coming from Minneapolis, so outside of the New York State system, but I manage a program called the Campus Kitchen Project, which is a national organization that has chapters on college campuses. And we do work around food security and food insecurity in the neighborhood around our college and then also on our college campus. And I think, so I work at Augsburg, which is a private four-year institution. And from where I sit, I mean, people often will assume that food insecurity is not an issue at private colleges. And I've found that that's absolutely not the case, certainly not at Augsburg, the university that I work at. And I think that because there's this assumption that if you're at a private four-year college or any college that you're not going to be facing food insecurity, there's this added stigma around accessing food resources. And so that's definitely a big barrier that we face here. So yeah, something that I think is really important is just helping break down that stigma, because there are so many students in college, even at four-year private universities, who are dealing with food insecurity.
Thank you. And Sally.
Good morning for a few more minutes. I work at the University at Albany, and we noticed that over the last 10 or 15 years, our student population, our student demographic had really changed. I am a proud alum of the university, but it looks very different now than it did in 1983 when I was there. We now have a population that is almost 50% first generation students, Pell Grant recipients. So we're looking at a much needier population than my cohort was. As Florian mentioned, we think of college education as a way up and out of a difficult financial situation. So we were really needed to shift gears and work with what we have in terms of our student population and help them attain their goals. So one of the first things that we did when we wanted to look at setting up an on-campus food pantry was we surveyed our students. And I have to tell you that our statistics really come very close to matching what you showed earlier for the state. Like 39% of our, and these are students who live in either on-campus apartments, so no meal plan, or off-campus. And I'll also add that probably 2/3 of our student population at UAlbany does not live on campus and thus does not have a meal plan. So 39% of those students answered that they felt hungry but did not eat due to needing to save money. 30% skip meals. And the one that really shocked me was that 26% of those surveyed lost weight without trying due to skipping meals. So we really, we partnered with a local pantry off campus, and they saw such a boom in their business, so to speak, that they actually asked us to work on getting that pantry opened quicker. And we were able to do that in 2019 with a really generous grant from the APLU.
Great. Well, thank you. And John, so you have more of a bird's eye view of things. And so just to repeat, why is college hunger an important topic? And what does it look like from where you sit? And you're muted.
No, thank you, Ruth, and everyone on the panel. And I think Sally kind of set me up really nicely. And I love the fact that she was in college in '83. I don't feel so bad now. So thank you for that, Sally, for offering that. So listen, I will tell you, I think it's the point of entry. Students are actually entering higher education with having made a different set of early life choices. I remember in my era, Sally's era, our era, we approached the institution and that was the occupation. That was the occupation. I didn't have children. I didn't have any other commitments. I wasn't a caregiver. So we have many of our students that are really coming to campus with some early life choices that they've made and commitments that they're obligated themselves to. And then the other thing too, Ruth, is that we're looking at our data, right? We have targeted data for persistence, retention, and graduation. And when we don't reach those benchmarks, we have to ask ourselves, why are we not doing that? Why are we not meeting those benchmarks? So we did a survey. We do a student opinion survey every 2 years, and then we did a food insecurity survey. And we found out from our students, they said to us, look, 45% of our students at community colleges were struggling, and they shared that they were not able to even complete the semester, or they had to stop out. And so our data was telling us that students were having some challenges and some very interesting times. And of course, we don't really help ourselves sort of as a nation by moving to that sort of 6-year graduation timeframe. And there's a reason behind that, because students are struggling to sort of finance and be packaged to get out in 4 years. And you couple that with the life choices, and then it sort of cascades down onto some of these challenges that we're having. So we have looked at our data, we've looked at our institutions, and I know that the Purple Pantry at University of Albany is a very, very good one. And we have many other examples like that. But our data, Ruth, is what really tells us that our students are struggling. But more importantly, we have to respond. And that's what we're spending a lot of our time doing each and every day, is making sure that our response to those challenges are first and foremost our priority.
And I always say that the data and the stories go hand in hand. And so, because when you say data, I think about my own experience going through the student system, community college, 4-year college, PhD. And I was that student who worked multiple jobs, had to figure out how to eat or pay rent. I worked in restaurants, so I thought, well, I'll just not eat today and I'll eat when I get to work later. So certainly that combination of hearing the stories and knowing that, I didn't think of myself as food insecure, even though I did go a day without eating so I could balance all my bills. So all of these things, I think, ring true when we're looking at what are the data. I always say the data, convinces me, but stories make me take action. And so we have to have them together to kind of do this work and to really understand what it looks like. So the next question we have, again, for anybody in this session, I'm watching the comment section. And if you want to interrupt us at any point and ask a question that you have, we're pretty flexible. From here on, I think I'm just going to ask some questions, and the people that want to answer those questions will answer them. And if I see something that looks good from the comment area, or anything that comes from the comment area, I won't make judgments on your questions. I will send them to the group. The next question we have is, what are some of the most significant factors that contribute to food security on a college campus? So where does it all come from? If we look at the root causes here, what are some thoughts? Again, this is the awkward online time. There you go, Sally. Thank you.
I think, again, as Florian indicated, the rising cost of a college education is, I think, a very big part of it. I could entertain you with what I paid for my first semester of tuition was $675. This year, when we paid my daughter's tuition at UAlbany, it was over $12,000. So tuition and room and board. So the cost of financing an education, right? They have to buy their books. They have to pay their tuition. They have to have a place to live. Where's the only place they can find flexibility? In what they eat or don't eat. So I think that the cost of an education is a huge factor, as is in UAlbany's case, the continuing struggle to just make ends meet separate from college, and students coming to college as a way out of those dire financial circumstances. So they're already coming to us at a disadvantage.
How about Florian or Ravi? What do you see, from what you see around you on the campus? What are some of your thoughts?
Yeah, so building off of Sally's idea, while there are increasing costs, there's also not a comparable increase in the minimum wage. So whereas previous generations may have been able to scrape by off of what they saved from summer or what they get from a part-time job, increasingly students are reliant on what they can get through grants or loans or from family members. This latter component I refer to as intergenerational wealth. And there are communities that disproportionately do not have access to that. Low-income BIPOC communities are especially vulnerable to this, as a history of systemic racism has made it so that those communities have a harder time accumulating wealth and actually passing it between generations. I think another way that people can become disconnected from that intergenerational wealth is through disownment. I would say that is more prevalent in the queer community, where some families still are not accepting of their child.
Hmm. Go ahead, Robbie.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with Florian's point, and I think that, you know, a lot of food insecurity definitely comes down to being an element of poverty. I think one other element, just through the work that I've helped do at SUNY Geneseo, one other element that I've definitely seen is lack of access to food. Even when there are food assistance programs in the area, students might not have a car and be able to get there. There might not be bus systems that are strong enough that, you know, like are accessible to off-campus students. Also, you know, students might just not know about their options. So there are a lot of problems of access that need to be consulted, especially since, you know, college students are in a particular position where they are often just incredibly busy all the time. And definitely, you know, like Sally was saying, it's definitely hard for a college student to make the time or effort to think about trying to get food, even if there are assistance programs in place, which is why it's more important than ever for food assistance programs to be a part of the SUNY program. And I definitely applaud the SUNY Food and Security Task Force's efforts to help incorporate that.
Any other thoughts on what's, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Ruth, thank you so much. I want to really just give a lot of praise to Robbie, because he kind of set it up really nicely of what some of the real touch points are. One of the things that we found at the system level, right, is that students are actually on meal plans, but some of them are on the actual lowest meal plan. You know, I was shocked when I talked to some students when we were doing our research. The young man said to me, well, I'm getting 10 meals a week. I said, 10 meals a week? You know, so he's actually on campus, right, in a residence hall, but he's on the lowest meal plan. And so when we think about how pervasive that might be across our system, it becomes a concern. So now what's the action behind that? The action is to find out, to the extent that we can, whether or not the auxiliary service corporations that work on our campuses, whether it's Sodexo, Aramark, Chartwell, or whomever, would they be willing to work with the dean of students or the vice presidents for student affairs, and will they be able to give them an opportunity to have a meal swipe program? And because I can tell you, when my daughter was at the University at Albany, I called her on Saturdays and she was asleep, and I said, did you go to breakfast? She says, no, Dad, nobody goes to breakfast. So there's a lot of unused meals on our college campuses. We want to be able to donate those meals to other students that really need them.
Yeah, and I'll just add, we wanted to start a Swipe Out Hunger program on our campus for a while. You should check it out, Google Swipe Out Hunger. There's a lot of campuses in the country that have a program like that. But often the barrier that campuses run into is that these food service providers like Sodexo, et cetera, rely on these unused meals for their bottom lines. And, ultimately, these food service providers are profit driven. And so often they're not going to let that happen. And so there needs to be a lot of advocacy on college campuses for that to happen. And then I'd say one more factor I wanted to add is just that often, even when students are on meal plans, the food that's being served in dining halls just doesn't meet a lot of students' dietary needs, whether it's dietary restrictions, different cultural foods that are important to students. So that can be a huge problem. So I found that there are lots of students who are on, paying for a full meal plan, but are still using our food shelf because they're just, the campus dining hall is not meeting their food needs. So that's a huge problem as well.
I think another thing that I don't think anyone mentioned was that tuition costs continue to rise, but financial aid doesn't come anywhere near keeping pace with that. So even our students who are considered to be fully funded, they have a zero expected family contribution, still end up with a gap of several $1,000s sometimes. So increases in tuition, stagnant financial aid is really a big part of this issue as well.
So there are some comments coming in around, Heidi says, I see many college students who will not access their on-campus food pantry or come to talk to me, someone who does SNAP outreach because of the stigma. Also, that if students get more than 50% of their meals on campus, they will not qualify for SNAP, and that the 10-meal plan might disqualify them. Do you want to make any comments in that direction? I do, and I can preface this by saying, I've seen campuses where they said, no, we take care of this. If you just go to the dean of students, they'll get you can get some swipes from us. All you have, but I kind of look at it and think, well, isn't the dean of students also the person that punishes you if you've done an infraction and that person has a really busy schedule, right? How do you make an appointment? Like when you're hungry, you don't make an appointment next week to talk to the dean of students. And so I think this goes to some of the barriers and misconceptions on campuses that maybe people can comment on. I think Sally was going to start. Maybe? No?
Well, can you just repeat the question? Because I kind of lost it.
There were a lot of things going on. I think, so the idea was that a specific question, if they get 50% of their meals on campus,
Oh no, that wasn't it. It was I thought it was the stigma piece.
There is the stigma piece as well.
We work on that by inviting all members of our community to utilize the pantry. So it's open to students, faculty, and staff. And we do have some adjunct faculty members who actually need those services as well. And I think for us, this has served to, if it's open to everyone, being there isn't as stigmatizing as if it was just for students. So that's part of how we are combating that. And we are seeing very high usage rates. Now, we don't know who isn't coming, but we know that we have a lot of people coming. So I'm feeling as though stigma is not as big of an issue for us as it may be in some other places.
So were you always open, or is that a switch that you made?
That's how we opened our pantry, as open to the entire UAlbany community.
Got it. How about Natalie? How do you work on the stigma piece on your campus?
Yeah, a lot of what we do is, well, this was before the pandemic, but before the pandemic, we would do these weekly fresh produce distributions in the student center that were open to anyone, faculty, staff, students, and tons of people would just come by, bring grocery bags, and pick up fresh produce. And we were just very clear with our promotion if this is open to absolutely anyone. And then we would also, as people were coming to get produce, tell them, hey, you want more food? Here's how to access our food pantry. And that was definitely a really, really helpful way to get people in the door. And we've seen since starting that it seems like the general stigma around using our pantry has gone way down.
Mm. And what do you say to people who say that somebody who doesn't deserve that handout might use it? What are that typical kind of response? What if they don't really need it? Rafi, you wanted to say something there?
Yeah, I think that is something we've encountered in our community while we were working with food security advocates. There was a faculty member who told our local food pantry, oh, college students, they don't need food assistance. They're all fine. They're just trying to take advantage, and they're just trying to get free food. And, it's just such a high misconception that, college students, they are in need and they do need assistance. And so, I think we've definitely worked to just spread a lot of awareness about the degree of college food insecurity to help, normalize and help people understand it as a very significant issue.
Hey, Ruth, can I just offer a quick comment here if I can? So when it comes to stigma, right, I believe, and I think others on the call can weigh in, I kind of think we're moving away from that in a more positive direction, because right now we have a lot of people, we have a huge peer advocacy agenda at the system level. Our chancellor has supported where we can get 1,000 students. That's our goal in the next academic year, to have 1,000 students serve as peer advocates. And so this whole notion of food insecurity and mental health and these other interconnected challenges that students face, student leaders at our student government presidents, student assembly leadership, they're all talking about this. So they are actually normalizing this challenge. And then the other thing that we're trying to do, and this one we're trying to be very, very considerate, but we know that a number of students have an expected family contribution of 0 or whatever it may be. We're trying to, as best as we possibly can, to direct those students to institutions within our system that will cause them the least amount of harm in terms of not having access to food. So maybe maybe some of the higher end institutions, I won't mention any names because I love them all, but maybe some of our more expensive colleges may not be the first entry point for our students. Maybe our community college might be a good entry point, or maybe one of our other campuses, but certainly don't go in on the high end if you already know that you have an expected family contribution of 0. So we're just trying a multiple array of things to help our students deal with this challenge. And I got to tell you, we are really getting good at it. And just to close, we're rolling out SNAP benefits, and now the 20-hour work requirement has been removed. And so we're really blasting our students with information, especially at our community colleges and educational opportunity centers. So we're going full speed ahead on this.
So I see something in the chat, and I'm going to answer it in my own way and paraphrase it and send a question back out, which is looking at how do we understand the structural, right? So the idea that pantries are normalized also I'm not going to paraphrase this well, but because that went up the chat a bit, that we are kind of creating this structural support that doesn't address the actual problem and issue. So I'm going to answer and then ask, being on a college campus, I know that we think a lot about supportive students. It's a stressful 4 years. And so on one hand, thinking about food security as part of an overall way of working with students who are, some of them moving away from their families or living on their own for the first time, taking on new responsibilities. It's a stressful time. And so in one sense, normalizing food security work on a campus fits into that larger mental health structure that I think we're working really hard. And if you look at AAC&U and bringing theory to practice and a lot of the different organizations that are looking to support work, that kind of holistic view of health on a campus is something that this fits nicely into in a way that doesn't fit maybe in other areas, outside of a campus environment. But on the other hand, I know that we have 2 students here who are doing a lot of work on policy. And I think, John, you're part, we're all part of policy change, thinking about changes to SNAP. I'm 200% sign me up to get SNAP for hot meals. Whoever, put me on that working group, I'll be on that task force. So what are some of the policy or some of the structural changes that go along with the work that we're doing to support our students?
I think one thing Natalie kind of touched on a little bit earlier is the role of auxiliary services. Currently, we have kind of businesses embedded into our campus looking to make a profit. I think that by collaborating with them and in some cases holding them accountable to the needs of students and getting them to work with, the financial aid students actually have, you can really mitigate the number of students that do have meal plans but are ending up food insecure anyhow.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree with Florian. And I think that, it is good when tackling college food insecurity to look at it from a variety of different elements. There's not one simple solution. It's not just increasing access to food assistance, but also increasing access to SNAP and also working with auxiliary services. Definitely at Geneseo, we were really pleased that our auxiliary services have moved away from price meal plans to everyone can go to the dining halls at an unlimited amount. That'll definitely make it so not even really have to worry about, running out of meal plan or anything like that. So we're strongly supportive of that. Also, creating an on-campus food pantry potentially would also really strongly help to, ingrain it into the college community and also allow to be a space for students to sign up for SNAP. So definitely just, tackling it from a lot of different elements. And, it definitely doesn't have to be just about food pantries, but also about any sort of assistance that students can get while also trying to get at those root causes of poverty.
I also just want to add that I'm just looking at Janet's comment or question comment. Each of us cannot do everything, right? We may not be able to make policy change, but I can keep that pantry going. And I don't see that as a problem. I'm going to feed kids as long as I can, while policy people are working on changing food insecurity in general. I don't see it as an either or. I don't see it as yes, it may be a Band-Aid, but I don't want to stop providing the services while we wait for change. I think it needs to happen simultaneously. And while I do food pantry, I'm relying on others to make those changes happen, because none of us can do it all, right? We're all working in our little corner.
I do think that that's a good, some of the points in there around, and it goes back to that holistic view of someone's experience as a, when I teach, whenever I can, I don't have textbooks in my class. So I put the readings together in a way that makes sense. So whenever I can, and I think there are a lot of people that are trying to do that, it still becomes kind of a Band-Aid type issue. And I do think that it's important to think about hunger. Hunger is always a symptom of a larger problem. And so when it comes to higher ed, hunger is a symptom of things that we can control in our school system, in the university campus system. And it's also an indication of what's going on at home, right, in the larger communities that we work in. So I do think it is our job to to provide food and also advocate for change in the structures that are leading people to, because we're on the front lines. If we're running a pantry, we know like what caused you to come in here today. We are the people that can get that data. I can't remember what time we're supposed to end. And so I want to make sure we get our last, what's that?
11:40 or 12:40, I think.
12:40. Good. We have a full hour. So, are there any other comments around some of the structural pieces that we're working on, policy changes or otherwise?
I think Sally brought up a good point that it is really a matter of addressing immediate need while still pushing for those long-term changes. At SUNY Geneseo, we kind of did this by implementing a delivery system to help students through the pandemic while quarantines were very prevalent and a lot of students were on lockdown, while simultaneously pushing to get a pantry on campus. So I think it is really about having a multifaceted approach.
Great. Go ahead.
On that note, Flurry, and I think the pandemic has really helped us with any stigma piece that may have still remained. I think people are now used to like, hey, I need help. I think that the pandemic has definitely reduced stigma. Also, the fact that our population is a fairly needy population, I think that many of them are used to relying on programs, unfortunately, and hence do not feel stigmatized when they need to ask for help at college.
Natalie, one out of curiosity on the student, because I see people talking about bringing students in when policy decisions are being made. Can you talk a little bit about, and Sally and everybody, what does student leadership look like in your programs and in the work you're doing?
Yeah, so I think something often, so we have a team of student employees that work with our program. So we're working on food issues in the neighborhood and on our campus, and we see those as very interconnected. We're not going to work on one and not the other. But I think that often what happens is there's so much work to be done in the everyday of just like moving food from point A to point B and bagging this and communicating with this person. And it is really easy to kind of just not have time for the policy level issues. And so I think we've started to try to focus on that through a collaboration with some other colleges in our area. So bringing together student leaders from several different colleges in the Twin Cities area to start talking about policy change and moving towards that. There's definitely a ton of work we need to do around that, and we often just don't have time. So I think what Sally said about, one person can't do all of it. I mean, I really wish that there was more of a focus on the policy side of things, but that can't necessarily be our team because we totally have our hands full. So that's a huge challenge. And I'm hoping that we can see more of that in the future, but I'm not sure what that will look like.
Definitely. Go ahead, Florian.
So I think the student role is one that we have the lived perspective often. But I think another advantage is that we don't have to deal with quite as much of the bureaucracy, at least not in the same sense. I don't have to worry about any form of real punishment if I step on someone's toes. There's no real repercussions. So we can kind of push for things more directly, more bluntly, and sometimes even a little uncomfortably if need be. And we also kind of have a little more immediate need to do so because it is directly impacting us and our peers.
Yeah, and I think going off of that with Florian's point, I think the difficulty of, students, I think why it's so important to get student input is because, students are only there for a few years at college, so it is definitely being an activist in for food security at my college. Like, it definitely was hard to really make change when there was such a limited time frame since a lot of us are graduating. But I think that's why it's so important that administrators do listen to students and do work with them and hear their inputs and to come up with the best solutions. Because, yeah, like Florian said, sometimes it is immediate, sometimes it's needed immediately, and it can't really be waited. And that's why I definitely agree that, the mood in the past year has greatly shifted in how people look at food security. There's been so much more openness to it. Just being totally honest from a student perspective, before the pandemic, we didn't get much feedback from a lot of different groups and people in our area about trying to push forward food security measures. But after the pandemic, people were much, much more willing to be supportive and greatly help us, and definitely really appreciated that.
I like the suggestion that Emily get an Emerson Fellow, maybe. I think that would be great. We only have another minute or two. There's a question and maybe just some closing comments, which is around what resources or suggestions. So if people want to move forward and take action on anything we've said here, or what are some suggestions that you might have for people who want to make a change around college hunger? And there was a question around whether or not you work with farms. If you work, and if any of you are working with local, so if you could sneak in that answer as well, that would be great. Maybe I'll start with Natalie and work my way into, and then move over to Robbie. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just speak to the farms question really quick. So we do a lot of that, which is really fun. So we partner with a lot of the farmers markets in our area, and we have gleaning programs where we recover all the surplus food that farmers can't sell at the end of the market. And then we donate that food to students as well as community members in our neighborhood. And that's been a super successful program. And then we have a corporate sponsor who actually compensates the farmers for any surplus that they donate to us, which means that both they're earning money from produce that they would have to throw away, and then we also get this amazing fresh produce from local farms that we get to give to people. So it's definitely a win-win. And oh gosh, I forgot what a
parting word of advice for your audience.
Parting word of advice
around college hunger.
Yeah, I would say just centering students in these conversations and making sure that student voices are being uplifted, I think, is the most important thing.
Awesome. How about Robbie? You're next on my screen.
Yeah, just want to say quickly, thank you so much for having me here, and me and Florian, definitely really appreciate it. In terms of the farm question, real quick, we actually had a farm in a local area who was willing to just grow food for us this year. And so the next generation of food security advocates, they're going to be harvesting them in the fall. So we're really grateful for that community collaboration and that support. My thing of advice is that definitely it's important to, hear from students, but I think also just with working with students, I think it's just so essential to, just make sure that you're working with how your community is specifically worked. There's not one size fits all solution for every single college. It's definitely important to examine your exact college's features and how best to serve that community. At Geneseo, we found that people weren't using our local food pantry really before the pandemic, and especially with the pandemic, they were not using it. And so that's why we decided to create our food pantry delivery program, and we greatly expanded how many students we're able to serve. I think we delivered about 400 bags of food to over 90 different students. So we were really proud of that change, and that's why it's important to examine the exact community and make sure that you are working to serve, your community for sure.
Wow, thank you. How about John? You're next on you're just the next screen that I'm looking at.
Yeah, Ruth, I would just simply say that, all our campuses are just doing something extraordinarily unique in their own way. Monroe Community College comes to mind. They have a mobile food unit. I mean, they're doing just exceptionally great work. And I mentioned UAlbany earlier, and they have an off-campus partner, and they're doing well. And then at Geneseo, I think it's really interesting. If students get, like, let's say if a student have a parking fine or something like that, they can actually pay that. They can donate food to the pantry for the amount of that fine. So I think it's really nice. So every one of our campuses are doing something unique. And to Robbie's point, geography does matter, because if you are, let's say you're in sort of like downstate, right? Then the partnerships that you have with your food bank is very, very important, because they can increase the volume of food, especially if the campus has a freezer and or a refrigerator in the pantry. So we're looking for the existing relationships to be sort of accentuated that way, but also the CBOs, the community-based organizations too. Those partnerships are also strategic. So the most important thing is to do the ordinary things extraordinarily well. And that's the only way we're going to get through this.
Mm. So we've got one. I'm probably going to keep everyone maybe a minute late, but Sally, what advice do you have for people to take the next steps or work on this issue?
Well, my perspective is college hunger. So I would urge any of you who work with college students to survey them, see what they need. If you don't have, if you don't ask the questions, you aren't ever going to know. And I guarantee you, if you are on a college campus, private, public, I don't care, you have hungry students.
Oh.
So survey them and convince your administration that this is something that's really needed, and that it can make a difference in persistence and retention. It makes a very big difference.
Interesting. And Florian, will you leave us with the final words of wisdom? By the way, I'm an MCC graduate as well. I'm a Rochester girl. That's why you got my little. Go ahead, Florian.
I just wanted to thank you, one, for having me on the panel. But I definitely agree with especially what Sally said, collecting that data, having especially stories from students is really compelling. And they're also a great resource to understand the full scope of the problem. We know firsthand why we are food insecure if we are, as well as how the system that is currently offered to us is working well or not. Beyond that, I'd also just say, look for integration in any connections. One thing I've really valued about Geneseo is that we were able to kind of put efforts together. There was an Office of Sustainability and a Community Garden Coalition and food security advocates, as well as some administrators that were all willing to come together and come up with innovative solutions to the food security issues on campus.
Mm. Well, I think we are going to leave it here. It's 12:30. People are probably getting hungry and grumpy. I thank everyone for coming to this. I know that we just scratched the surface of the conversation. There's so much more to be done. And I know that I'm kind of excited to go back onto campus. I think Lisa may be still here. I've got some advocates on my own side to figure out what Sienna is going to do next. But I know that in my office, we have a refrigerator downstairs, and it would be as easy as possible. It would be not too hard to put some food in that fridge and just tell people and mark it as open for all. So I thank you all for the time that you took to prepare and to meet and practice earlier in our little practice sessions. And I hope that people feel comfortable reaching out to us if they have more questions about how we work and how we do this work. And John, I look forward to continued data from the SUNY system. All right. And I think we are
Look
done.
forward to it, Ruth.
Definitely. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Enjoy your lunches.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.